Welcome back to Operation Evil. I'm your host, Nyoka. This episode is number 110. It is titled The Walton, Kentucky Murder Case of 1973. This case was actually recommended by Jennifer quite some time ago, and I finally looked into it. Thank you, Jennifer, for recommending it. It was definitely a wild goose chase of research for me. And I will tell you guys everything I found. And this story is crazy. It's disturbing. And as always, listener discretion is advised. But I do want to say, this case reminded me of one that was covered a long time ago. And that was episode 19, The Corpse Under the Waterbed. And if you listen to that one, you'll understand why. But yeah, local case. And if you've been listening a while, you know I'm from Northern Kentucky. This was in Walton, Kentucky, which is basically my backyard. Only I wasn't born yet. So I've never heard of it. So let's just jump right on in. As I already stated, this took place in Walton, Kentucky back in 1973. And little did anyone know that two families' lives would be forever changed when they woke up that dreadful day on October 29th. The victim's brother, Jeffrey Ammer, said it best. He said, quote, "You read of something like this happening to someone else, but you never dream it would happen to you." End quote. The Ammer family lived at 11 Fairview Court. The family was pretty large, too. Mr. and Mrs. Ammer had 8 children, 4 of which were living at home during this time, and that included 18-year-old Jeffrey, 13-year-old Teresa, 11-year-old Laura Jo, and 7-year-old Paul. They also had 3 other daughters, Diane, Janet, and Frances, and a son, David, who were all out on their own at this time. On October 29th, 11-year-old Laura Jo Ammer went to school as she normally would on that day. Laura was a 6th grader at Walton, Verona. She was a good student, bringing home mostly A's and B's. She wanted to be a teacher when she grew up. After she returned home from school that day, she left her house again by 4 p.m. Her mother, Elizabeth, said, quote, "She went to the Davenport house to pay the girl for something." End quote. She was referring to the Davenport's daughter, Florence, an 8th grader. The Davenport family lived at 17 Fairview Court. Their family was a lot smaller compared to the Ammer family. Mr. and Mrs. Davenport only had 2 children, 15-year-old Eugene and 8-year-old Florence. That was the girl Laura Jo went to see that day. But by the time Mr. Ammer came home from work around 5:30 p.m., Laura Jo still hadn't returned home for dinner. The parents decided it was time to search for Laura, except she was nowhere to be found. It was time they got the authorities involved. State police were notified, and Trooper Harry Roeder was called to the Ammer home at 10:40 p.m. to join the search for Laura. Trooper Roeder said, quote, "We checked with her friends and found out she might be spending the night with friends." End quote. Now, Laura's parents knew better, though. Even Reverend Robert Yates, the family minister and pastor at the Walton United Methodist Church, would tell the police that the Ammers did not believe for 1 second that their daughter would randomly stay the night with friends without telling them. And really, I mean, what 11-year-old does that? You're still a child and don't you ask for permission? So, I don't know. But anyway, back to it. The Reverend stated, quote, "She just wasn't the type of child to do this. She wouldn't have gone away. There was no reason." End quote. Laura's family looked all night until 3 a.m. when they finally fell asleep. But as soon as daybreak hit the next morning, they were back at it. Mr. Ammer went as far as to go to the Walton Verona school to talk to the children as they were getting off the school buses to see if any one of them knew anything about his daughter missing. Meanwhile, the neighbors on Fairview Court were conducting their own house-to-house searches looking for Laura. The neighbors that lived at 9 Fairview Court, James Stevenson and his wife Mara, were dedicated to helping find Laura. The night Laura Jo went missing, they were out until 10 p.m. searching. Now, the next morning, James Stevenson's wife joined Mrs. Davenport at her home around 8:30 in the morning. And that was the moment that the truth was discovered. James said, quote, "They first went through the basement, then upstairs. My wife saw a foot beneath the bed in Eugene's bedroom and ran and got Mr. Ammer," end quote. Mr. Ammer, who just returned home from being at the school that morning and talking to the kids that were getting off the school bus about his daughter's whereabouts, was told this information and he rushed to the Davenport home. When Mr. Ammer reached 15-year-old Eugene's bedroom, he lifted up the bed, and there Laura was, lying there, deceased. He dropped the bed and cried. I can't imagine what that moment must have been like for him, seeing his little girl murdered and underneath the neighbor's son's bed. I don't know. Have you ever heard like the screams and cries of a parent who lost their child? It's horrific. And it makes my heart really hurt for them. So Eugene's mother called the Boone County Police, and Lieutenant Dan Stamper came to the residence. You know, on the flip side of all of this, I also can't imagine being Eugene's mother, discovering what her child had done and having to call the police on your own child. Like, that has to be bizarre. But I feel bad for these parents and the families, too. So Laura's body was partially clothed, and she had marks on her neck, suggesting to Boone County Coroner Don Sith that she was possibly strangled. Laura's body was taken from the Davenport home to the Kettering Laboratory in Hamilton County, where an autopsy would be performed to determine the cause of death and whether she was sexually assaulted. Boone County police went straight to Walton Verona High School, where Eugene was, and took him into custody. And according to one of the articles I located in my research, State Police Detective Sergeant James Evans said the Davenports have been home most of the afternoon and evening on October 29th, except for a brief time late in the afternoon. So apparently that's when it must have happened. But the Davenport family, they were unaware of the girl's body in their son's bedroom. No clue. Now, 15-year-old Eugene, he was described as quiet, a small kid. He wore like heavy shell-rimmed glasses and had dark hair. The principal at the time, Gary Muncie, said that Eugene was a C student and a shy, very quiet boy. He said, quote, "It's funny, though, you never get to know the good students. I only saw him in the halls. He was a nervous type child, always patting his hand on his leg," end quote. The principal rode with Eugene to the county police station in Burlington. He said that Eugene didn't say anything, just sat there chewing his gum. Eugene Wayne Davenport was questioned by state and county police in Boone County juvenile court offices after he was taken into custody. The following day, October 31st, Halloween, Boone County Police Lieutenant Don Stamper said that he would bring murder and rape charges against Eugene at the 10 a.m. juvenile court hearing. Eugene was charged with willful murder in the detentiary hearing. Eugene, who was represented by court-appointed public defender Wilbur M. Zevley, pleaded not guilty, and a hearing was scheduled for November 16, 1973. Meanwhile, Eugene was taken back to the Northern Kentucky Reception Center in Crittenden, where he would remain until his hearing. If he is found guilty, the court would conduct a disposition hearing. And then at that time, the judge will decide if Eugene will be tried as an adult and held for action by the Boone County grand jury, or if he should be placed in the custody of the Kentucky Department of Child Welfare, or if he should be placed on probation under orders from the court. As far as Laura's autopsy goes, the coroner said that preliminary reports showed that she died of asphyxiation as a result of strangulation, and that the blood on the body and clothing of Laura reveals the possibility that a sexual assault may have occurred. Also, do you remember the marks on her neck that were indicated that she could have been strangled? Well, it turns out that assumption was correct, and that a handkerchief that was used to gag her was found stuffed down her throat. There were also scrapes and scratches on Eugene's back, and tests would be made to determine if parts of his skin is found under Laura's fingernails. The coroner placed the time of death at about 4 p.m. Monday, the day that she went missing. And that makes sense because she went missing around her home at that time. Services for Laura Jo were held on November 2nd, 1973, in the Chambers and Grubbs Funeral Home in Walton, Kentucky. Laura was laid to rest in the Forest Lawn Memorial Park, located in Remlinger, Kentucky. Eugene Wayne Davenport ended up pleading guilty in November of 1973. He sat motionless before the judge and showed no sign of remorse as the judge announced that Eugene will be in custody of Kentucky Department of Human Relations until he is 21 years old. The judge remanded Eugene to juvenile authorities at the Northern Kentucky Reception Center in Crittenden. The rape charges against Eugene were dismissed. The judge said, quote, "The commitment is for an indefinite period of time, as long as the human resources officials determine proper," end quote. The hearing lasted less than 30 minutes. Allowed in the closed hearing were his parents, his attorney, public defender county attorney, child welfare personnel, and police officials. The hearing was both a disposition and adjudication hearing. The judge also stated, quote, "We had the psychological information we needed on the boy. Since he pleaded guilty, there was no need of proof of guilt. But the court had to make sure it was a voluntary plea. He will stay at Crittenden until the workup tests are completed and it is determined where he should be sent. He could remain at Crittenden for treatment or be transferred to another facility," end quote. When Mrs. Ammer was asked about the outcome, she said, quote, "I don't have any comments," end quote. I did find some kind words in this article. Well, it's more like a section in the Kentucky Post, and it was from December 4th, 1973. And the section it was called Letters to Editor. And this is what it said. The title was Help Both Families. Well, then it went on to say, "My heart is filled with sadness and compassion for the families of both Laura Jo Ammer and Eugene Wayne Davenport, and for the boy also. I pray that God will help both families and also Eugene Wayne and will properly guide the official who must make a decision in this case. That was from Miss Rita Coy at 206 Main Street in Erlanger, Kentucky. I did gather some thoughts from the community between all the different articles that I was able to locate. So Fred Jones, he was the owner of the Ashland Oil Service Station at the corner of Fairview Court. He said he knew both Eugene and Laura Jo. He said, quote, Eugene was very quiet, always polite, but would only talk when you talked to him. And he would also tear off my calendar for the new day, end quote. When he spoke about Laura Jo, the girl with dimples who loved to ride her bicycle, he smiled and said, quote, she was mischievous. Fred said that the children on the street always waited in the service station until the school bus arrived. So that's how he got to know some of the kids around the area. Now, remember the Stevensons who helped search for Laura, and his wife was the one who saw the foot under the bed and she ran to Mr. Amer? Well, their daughter, Valerie, remembers riding home with Laura on the bus on that last day. And Valerie said, quote, she was talking with her sister, Teresa, who's in 8th grade. She was mad at somebody who had punched her little brother, Paul, at school, end quote. So, sounds like she was defending her little brother. In April of 1974, Walton, Verona 6th graders planted a young dogwood tree with flowering pink blossoms, creating a living memorial for Laura Jo. Her 70 classmates in the 2 6th grade classes decided to plant the tree for Laura, but other classes wanted to participate too. So about 400 elementary students saved their pennies and bought the tree for about $25. Quote, we wanted something to remind us of Laura. We were glad to do it, said 12-year-old Scott Reisner. It would be a nice way to remember her, thought 12-year-old Leslie Maddox, who also said, quote, the dogwood flowers are like she was. They are very pretty, end quote. I thought that was so sweet. So what happened to Eugene? And this is where things get a little complicated. So I tried so hard to follow up with what happened to Eugene after he pled guilty. And I had zero luck. I mean, there were no more articles that could be found. I got creative and I searched every possible way that I could get any kind of information. And I did find his mother's obituary, which stated that she was preceded in death by a son, Eugene Wayne Davenport, in 1975. However, I couldn't find anything relating to his death. So if this is the case, and I think it is, he died only 2 years after Laura's murder, which would have made him 17 years old. And the cause of death is unknown. And I can't even say this for sure, but I like to tell you guys everything that I find and leave it up to you. Maybe there's locals out there that's listening and they know. I don't know. I don't know what happened to him. But I am going to end on this note. And I wanted to end the story of Laura Jo Amer with something that her mother said in an article. And it said exactly this. Miss Amers, with tears welling in her red-rimmed eyes, said, quote, nobody knows what it is like until they go through it. I have lost infants, but it's nothing like this when you have them for a while. Somewhere I will find the strength, end quote. And that will do it for this episode. If you can't get enough of Operation Evil, consider supporting the podcast by joining our Patreon. You will get a shout out, and you will get at least one bonus episode per month that is exclusive to our supporters. If you can't join Patreon, consider buying me a coffee. All the links can be found in the show notes. Or, if you would like to support the show for free, rate the show on the app you listen on. Tell a friend, like and follow the Operation Evil Facebook page. Doing any of these things helps so much. Appreciate each and every one of you. And I'll be back next time with a new episode. Goodbye.